Cloud Access and REST API. For this application, I got the target and the job to get a nice application built, and this application should use our REST API to contact our Exceed TurboX server, because we have to set up several times proof of concept environments, and sometimes it's really a long story to get every user included into an application. You need to use a special front end. You have to set up profile. That means access to special applications. And sometimes a profile can have more than 200 different settings, sets of settings, and you have to track them all. And I got the target and the job to create an application, a team developer-based application, by using a REST web service to connect to this backend, to set up all these environments, to set up users, to compare maybe profiles, to load special settings, to pass the settings to a new server, to set up a new server without using the front end, only doing more or less automatically. So at least I used our team developer built-in REST API, and I found out that a few things would be very helpful for our developers. So with Team Developer 7.4, we have also a Json.apl. So I want to give you a short overview about this APL. First of all, we have a functional class called sul.json.config. Inside this config environment, or config class, you will see we have some function like set the authentication, set decrypt, set the timeout for a special web service. We can enable a proxy, we can set a proxy, so only for configuration reason. And the second functional class inside this sul.json APL is working with APIs, like set a method, set request data, serialize, deserialize, and other useful information. Set this information. So at least what you can see, this is inside the sul.json class. Maybe I go one back because I could see that someone could not see our that we can see all of our slides. So at least sul.json timeout. Here's a small code sample. In this case, I create a class of JSON config, sends the authentication, and you will see I send in the authentication for myself, and I create out the password. I set the timeout. I get back the old version of timeout. That's why I use it twice. At least I want to pass in again the same number, what I want to see if this was really set. And also I set the method, for example, to HTTP GET. Using and working with REST API samples means you can use a special wizard inside Team Developer environment, and inside this environment you can type in the REST API URL, and you get at least the current runtime information, or you get all this classes, like as a SOAP web service, you get all the instance variables. And in my case, it was pretty simple. In our REST API description, there's also a nice tool inside. That means I can test all these different REST API calls, and I can use pretty simple these samples, and I could use the samples also in my coding. What I did, I created only a local variable with this object or runtime, maybe based on the class JSON current runtime. On the left-hand side, you see all the instance variables. I can set the user, the password. I can set the URL. I extend the URL with the name of the API call of the web service. I set the inside a special data field. You will see it later on. For debugging reason, I set the URL again to display the URL, and I use the sul.json deserialize UDV. What I have to do is I have to pass in the name of the object. So this is really something which I had to investigate. What is really the name? It's not runtime, it's really runtime as a name. I have to type in as a second parameter the URL, the defined URL, user password, and I get back maybe an error. If something happens, like a timeout comes in, or I choose the wrong URL, and so on. And then, at least if this is done, I get all this information, like the runtime version and so on, inside my object, and I can pass this object to my front end. I can also use more complex structures, like nested objects. In my user, class user, I have also an instance variable, which is also a class user role, and, for example, has the name role. Inside user's role, I have the ID and the name. So it can be nested. It can also be arrays of objects inside a functional class. So if you look into this code snipsel, I create an object or user, and the combo box user, or the user's role, is passed into our user.role.name. Again, it can also be an array and so on. I can pass in more information. I get more information out of the object. So at this point, it is something like the URL. And of course, I can use passing in information like HTTP post by using serialized UDVs. I get a result back. Maybe I have to pass also user and password in, and I get also an error information if something happens. Let's go to the demo. I want to share my screen again. Here we go. And let's have a look into my Team Developer application. So this is my tool. We will find a lot of information. Let's start at least my application, and you will see it looks pretty cool. I got my environment. I see how many people, for example, are now have the possibility to access my backend, my ETX server. I have different groups. I can assign users to groups by using the REST API. I can see that, for example, that I am running a special application. So every time if I click, for example, on a tree, or if I choose something inside my grid, I get information. I'm looking into I'm sending information into my REST API, getting back information from my application, from my backend, and so on. So if you look into the runtime, you saw it before, you will see this is my runtime version. So ETX1 current runtime means I get the runtime version, I get the packages, client platforms, and so on. Also, what I can show is a special profile. So this is a typical profile, and you can see also the attributes of this profile. So there's a long list of attributes to set. So I can do a copy of the profile. I can export this profile to an XML. I can do a copy. I can compare it with other profiles, and then I can send back this information for a new user. Like I add a new user in my user environment, and then I can assign a profile to a user or to a user group. It helps me to run or set up a proof of concept for different customers in a very, very short time without using the web and front end, without passing all the different steps by using this environment. If you look into the environment, you will see this is my server, my user, my password. I have a special API key. And for example, to get the user list, I have to extend this information to my user URL. And then I get information about users, a user list, for example. I can also use a special add user to group. I have to pass in as a parameter the group ID as a user ID, which should be added by ID, for example, to a special user group. So I can use Team Developer to replace the tags inside my application, and then this information is directly sent to my API call with this information, and then the user is automatically inserted. So I can also compare profiles, and you will see this is something, a daily work if you want to set up a server. And I can get also the different settings. So to get, for example, SQL Talk Plus to run remotely, normally I have to check 283 different settings and options. Most of them options are the same, but you will see we have also a few changed options, like the access, like the window size, the target platforms, Linux, for example, and so on. So we have also a lot of not set informations, which are not needed for this environment. So all of this can be set by using my environment, this new environment, and it's really heavily used because everyone can now set up the environment without knowing the target system, without knowing the application. So it's a very, very easy way to get this application to work. And now Martin will show you a little bit more. Oh, wrong, I want to show a little bit source code. That one. Only to give you information, get user list. Yeah, this is, for example, getting a user list. I have to use the user and password, the global. Then I have to concat the URL and the API call. I do a deserialize, pass in this information, and I get back a filled object user. And then I can use, for example, an index because it's an array. I can pass this information into my front end, into, for example, into a grid. So pretty easy, no database access is needed. And also, if I use a current user, I have also a function to get a current user. I have to pass in the user and the password. I have to concat my URL with my API information. I pass out the URL to see everything is fine and so on. Then I set also user and password information into the data fields. I do is deserialize at this point. I clean up my error message if an error occurs. And then I get all this information into this object, and I can pass this information into my front end. And of course, if I run it, you will see get user information. This is the information I get back. And you can see this is, for example, the URL, and I extend it with my user's current information. So pretty easy use of REST APIs inside my application. And now Martin will go ahead and will show you what you can do with ETX.
Oh, Helmut, really, I wanted to present the benefits, and I'm not ready to do the demo, honestly.
Okay, sorry.
Do you have that in Access? Can you show that?
Yes, I can. Oh, well, I can. I have to start it. I have to start a profile. You can start with the benefits, and maybe we have enough time to see an application running.
Okay, so just so you know what we are talking about here, OpenText Exceed TurboX is a application virtualization and server virtualization software product that does virtualize Windows and Linux applications. By application virtualization, I mean that you can take, for example, a team developer application, put that onto a, let's say, Windows server, and give your users access to that via the Exceed TurboX dashboard. And that means that the user can open that team developer application either directly in a browser tab. So one of the clients we have is an Html5 client. So basically the team developer application or SQL Talk or whatever will run in a browser tab. Or you use the native client, and that then means that we have a little program that will get installed on your computer that is the client. That client can do a little more things, like interacting with the backend systems, moving files forward and backward, clipboard copying and things like that. But in general, you can use a browser tab. So basically from an iPad, you can access a team developer application now. So let me just move here to the next slide. So what's different about Exceed TurboX? What's different, compared to Citrix or compared to Microsoft RDP or open source solutions like No Machine? The history of Exceed TurboX comes from, the Linux Unix side, where there was a need for very complex engineering applications, or let's say 3D, 2D CAD applications, to be made available on let's say, lower cost Windows desktops or laptops. So in engineering, you frequently need very complex applications that use a lot of graphics power. They have very high-end graphics cards, very high-end user workstations. And ETX basically allows you to virtualize that. And the side product of that is that we can use that system for Windows applications as well. And we, for example, do have our own transport protocol, not RDP, but with us it is called Windows Direct, and that is significantly faster than Windows Direct. And for example, if you have a cloud server and you configure that cloud server to have a virtual GPU, so that has a, let's say a more powerful graphics card, then you will likely see the performance of your team developer applications to be faster when they run remotely than when you run them on your local desktop. Okay, so you get, what we have is very good bandwidth usage, so very low bandwidth usage. You get a very good user experience even when you have low bandwidth. In fact, we have customers that have their data center like in California and have the engineers working in Singapore, and that still works nicely. For IT, we have centralized administration and management, and basically what Helmut did is accessing those management REST APIs. We do also have, of course, the web user interface that maybe we will be able to show you in a minute, where you centrally manage users, session activities, you manage your application servers, you do load balancing between the application servers, and you have your access to your authentication system, which in our case is Windows or Microsoft Active Directory, of course. So basically, you can import your Microsoft Active Directory to set up your remote access system. And then in that Active Directory, you have users and groups. And the user groups you can then use to deploy the applications to the users. So you can say the engineers get this application, the office workers get this application, finance workers get this application, and so on. And one important thing is that I said application virtualization and desktop virtualization. Application virtualization is quite interesting because it allows you to basically run a remote application as if it were a local application without the remote desktop around it. So you can have a team developer application running remotely on your laptop or your Windows computer, and it looks as if it's a locally running application, but it's actually being served from an application server in the data center or in the cloud. We do have high stability. This product, Exceed TurboX, is available since many years, and Hummingbird, like Gupta, has a lot, or the Exceed products like Gupta have a more than 20-year history in providing remote access. So they are very stable. You get load balancing and high availability, if you like. So you can build up mirror systems that can jump in case of single points of, if a single point of failure fails. And of course, all data that is transmitted between the sources, between the source and the between the backend or the data center system and the user is encrypted. You can have mixed Unix and Linux environments. For you, it's of course more Windows. The nice thing is with the new HTML5 client, you can basically use any client operating system as the client. You can use Windows, Mac, Linux, tablet computers, Android tablets, Apple tablets, whatever, to access team developer applications. And another nice thing is you have sharing and collaboration features. That is nice for IT. If you experience a problem, you can basically log or call IT and bind IT into your current session so they can see what's going on your system. That's one thing. But you can also do that to enable remote work. So if you have, let's say, a team developer application, order entry, and you're not kind of sure, what single order items mean, you can include other people into your session so you can work jointly or collaboratively on a remote session. So this is how it works. You see on the left side, I've mentioned that all these different operating systems with native clients and the browser client. All data that is being transported is encrypted. And then you can have data center, machines in the data center, machines in the office, or machines in the cloud. And these are your application servers. And there also is one ETX server, which Helmut did access to retrieve all these values from the REST service. And the application servers, which are the ETX connection nodes there in this, they run on servers, whatever server racks you have, and for that special case of engineering applications, you can also use virtualized GPUs, which are very powerful and allow you to share graphical processing units between multiple users of a application server, basically, and that can enhance the rendering of your application quite dramatically. And that's kind of the secret sauce of ETX, is that the rendering is happening on the server side. So the server renders what will be shown on the client. And it's also important to say that from the server on the right side, you get the screen content for the left side, but the screen content is exactly adapted to the screen resolution of the client. So there's no resizing being done so that it kind of fits into the client, like with some open source or free products. They scale up the resolution so it fits. No, it's the native solution of the client is being displayed on the client, but it is being generated on the server. And then let's say the important facts for ETX for the single user groups in an organization are, for organizations, you get lower cost because higher user productivity and lower IT cost because centralized shared servers cost less than more expensive user workstations. You have total control for IT. You can manage everything from backup to operating system updates to application updates. You can manage those centrally, and you don't have to support your users to manually install anything. And end users have responsive applications. As I mentioned before, they can even be desktop applications. They can be looking like desktop applications, but are remote applications. You can work from anywhere and have better collaboration. Okay, and with that, Helmut, can you show something? Or
yes, I can show something. I share my screen.
Thank you.
And let's have a look into my island application. As you can see, this application is now running inside a browser. So this is really something that's running on my my server. You saw this application before, and now I can, for example, work with this application without any problem. I can use this application really inside the browser. So I need to whatever, save it again, get a refresh. So this is now running inside a browser. Let's switch it off. Suspend session. No, don't suspend it. Terminate session. I want to terminate it. And I can show now the dashboard if you run, for example, applications from a remote. So what you can do is, if you start, for example, the island applications, these are my favorites, and you're still an active process. You saw this process running on my demo with my cloud environment and so on. So I can start this application. I can do all the settings, add the settings, and so on. I have a dashboard. I can also use the REST API, which I have shown before, to set up all these environments by using a Team Developer application. But if I start, for example, the island application remotely, so I will be asked Do you want to start it as a native client or a web client? As a native client, it starts now. The process launches as a session, and you will see after a while, it takes a second, this application is now running remotely. The application is running inside the cloud on a server, and again, you will see all this information, column was changed, and so on. I bring it back, save. I can do an exit, or I can launch it as a web client, and then my application should run inside a browser, on any browser. That means also on a tablet PC. Here we go. So there's no need to install something on a client PC. So this application is now really running remotely. And the performance is brilliant.
I just want to mention these URLs here, opentext.com/Gupta. There you can find the information on all the Gupta products. And not to forget the Gupta YouTube channel. You can see all the historic videos, but we will, in a few days, we will also have the videos of the Dev Day of this year up on YouTube. And actually, here's one question coming in, I think that we can answer. What about printing in the cloud solution? I think we can print when you use the native client. That doesn't work when you use the HTML client. So yes, printing is possible.
Yep. So we have an automatic forwarding to the printer. For example, you can also use inside, or you can set up the local settings, like I can use my local printing. I'm allowed to store something local. I'm allowed to use maybe an OSB stick. I can avoid this by saying it's not allowed. You are not allowed to use your local printer, and so on. So there are different ways to do the setup for a remote worker. If you want to print something inside the browser, so you need a special browser printer driver. So at this point, this is not implemented yet.
In general, for the let's say the intellectual property protection, there are several levels of granularity that you can define. So you can define if a user can copy from the remote clipboard to the local clipboard. You can allow it. You can prevent it. You can allow if a user can print to the local printer or not. And you can allow if the user can use the file transfer to transfer files from the remote computer to the client computer and vice versa. So everything is under control there for IT. So, and that can all be set in these profiles that Helmut showed you in the Team Developer application. I think there are no more questions, so we can wrap this up. Thank you very much for joining again today. We hope you enjoyed this Split Up Dev Day. Where in a few days we will make available the videos on YouTube, and we hope you have a great day. Thank you very much again.